Hey, welcome to Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm your host, Bruce Waller, where I get to talk to leaders that are making a difference in the workplace and in our communities. What did they do to get started, and what are they doing to stay there? And oh my goodness, you're in for a treat today as I'm getting to talk to Billie Wright. Billie, well, she's a leadership consultant and performance coach. She's also the 2023 Austin SHRM president. And if that's not enough, I just saw where you were also listed as number 2 of the top 23 mentors in 2023 at Upnotch. Billie Wright, I'm so excited to have you on the show. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great, Bruce, and thank you for having me. I feel honored. What am I, like number 157 on your list? Hey, I made it to the list though.
Hey,
Yay.
I've had you on my list ever since I met you. I've been like energized. You have an incredible energy. And, I've had some, I mentioned you are the Austin SHRM president. I've had some other Austin SHRM Knights on the
Mhm.
show. Angela Shaw, who you just graced the stage with at
Yeah.
was it Reworked?
Reworked Connect last Friday.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. I've also had Roseanne Garza on the show, Sarah Glasser, and
Mm-hmm.
Brian Hayes. So you're
Yeah.
representing Austin.
Yeah. Got to get us out there.
Oh, yeah. No, I love that. Hey, we're going to get into leadership. I cannot wait to visit with you about all things leadership. Hey, I do want to ask you as we start the show, what'd you think about our spring meeting in San Antonio?
I loved it. I tell you, I loved it. That group down there, I tell you, they just welcomed us with open arms. And with the mariachi band, I could have just stayed there all day. But they were so gracious and hospitable. And Kim Carpenter, who was our speaker there, she's actually an Austin SHRM member. So, needless to say, I have her coming in doing some leadership development training for our board at our June meeting. And also, too, hopefully she can come be a monthly speaker. So, but just to get out and connect and fellowship with my HR peeps in the Texas SHRM community, I mean, it's the ultimate, Bruce. You know this. You've been doing this for a minute. But just to be able to catch up and connect to see what every other president and president-elect is doing around the state, man, you just come back with so many ideas, so many connections, and it's just a great opportunity. And I'm so glad that I'm in this role that I get to do that, because otherwise, to just be, another Monday. But being in this role as president, I take it so seriously. And then these connections that are points of connection, man, it's just great. So I know that after my time is done as the past president of Austin SHRM, I'm going to have some lifelong friends and connections just through this, right?
I love how you said, hey, if it weren't for that group, Texas SHRM, it'd be just another Monday. That is
Mm-hmm.
so funny. Hey,
Yeah.
Kim Carpenter, she talked
Yeah.
about trust. And so
Mm-hmm.
excited to hear you're going to have her in Austin. She was
Mm-hmm.
fantastic.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
she was great. And one of the things about our board, me coming in as president, so just to kind of set the stage and tone for you. So I'm a high performer. I'm one of those leaders that come in and go, okay, I can see all this stuff that we need to do, and we need to do it in a very short period of time. But I also too recognize that not everybody is on warp speed like I am. And so just coming into this role, our very first quarter, Bruce, I can't even begin to tell you how much work this board has done for the members of Austin SHRM. And they've just been, man, they're just such a great group. And when Kim spoke on trust, and I said, hey, do you talk on resiliency training? And she goes, I do. And I said, could you please come and do that for our board? Because we've just been through so much and just transitioning through and then coming out of COVID. And 95% of HR professionals now say they're burnt out. And so, this is a volunteer gig. It's a whole other role, a whole other job. And so when you're asking people to volunteer their time for that, you're asking them to do things after hours, which takes away from family time, maybe take away from some gym time or what have you. And so, just bringing Kim in to speak to us about resiliency and what that looks like, it's just going to be a great time. So when she spoke on trust too, that spoke a lot to me personally, because I know as a leader, if you don't have trust among your ranks, you what do you have? I mean, honestly, you have to really build up that trust.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that. And I
Mhm.
love how you're talking about resiliency. I've had a
Mhm.
lot of guests talk about resiliency. I think that that's so important. Hey, before we dive into all that, I know you do a little bit of work for the Lineker Group. Talk a
Mhm.
little bit about that group and
Mhm.
how you serve your customers.
Yeah, so I came about with that group when I worked for state government in Washington State. So the principal owner of the Lineker team, they're out of Washington State. She and I worked together and co-collaborate on some leadership development stuff for all of Washington State. And just kind of when I moved back to Texas, she reached out to me at the height of COVID and she goes, "Hey, I'm stepping out on faith. And I'm going to do this thing around executive coaching and training and development because that's what she does." She was also too an academic professor and teaching on public administration. And she says, "How would you like to come and join me in being a coach?" And I said, "Why the heck not?" I established an executive coaching program at one of the state agencies I work for. So, it's in my wheelhouse and right in my backyard. And I've been with her now for 2 years. I'm a contracted executive coach in leadership development. So I do a lot of training also too around leadership development. But I love coaching. Mentoring and coaching are two different things. But I coach a lot of executives in Washington State, and even some that found me on Upnotch do the exact same thing. So that's what I do with the Lineker team. I do a lot of executive coaching and team building, training around HR, imposter syndrome, DEI, those kind of things. Because I've been in HR for 25 years. So there's not a subject, I don't think, that most people in a leadership role that they don't bring up that doesn't touch back on people and stuff now. Because that's what leadership is all about. It's about leading people. And so that's how I got involved with them. And I've been with them for 2 years now.
I love that. I love that. I want to get into this mentor versus coaching for sure. But before we do that, I would love to hear the Billie Wright story. Like, where did you grow up? And how in the world did you get to where you are today?
Okay, so it is one of those trips where it's around the world in 80 days kind of thing. So I grew up in a little town called Vivian, Louisiana. It's in the northwest corner of Louisiana. Small town, 4,000 people. The joke there is that you don't marry anybody from home because you're probably related. It's that small. But I grew up also too in Shreveport, Louisiana. So I spent my childhood years through high school and things like that in Shreveport, Louisiana. But all of my family ties are in that little small town, Vivian, Louisiana. And how I came about in HR, Bruce, was really I was a reluctant participant. I put it that way. I started out as an executive assistant and I worked in the hospital system, LSU Medical Center. I worked in the hospitals. I was executive assistant to the chief of surgery. I was executive assistant to a hospital CEO. And it was in that last role as an executive assistant to a hospital CEO, their executive VP of HR kept trying to get me to come over to HR. And, and I was like, I'm not coming over there. They got a bad reputation. That's where they hire and fire people. I'm not going over there because we know what that side of the house is like. And that was when it was called personnel. But she just kept after me for like 9 months. This woman was relentless. And then finally, I just took a chance on it. And I had to, and by the way, I had to take a pay cut if I was going to go over there and work there. But what drew me to it was one, her tenacity. Two, she was mentoring me and I didn't even know it. And the third thing was that she was a Black female. And back then in HR, she was a unicorn. Usually back then, those jobs, and you know this, Bruce, they were relegated for white men. Very seldom did you see women in that type of role, and in particular, a woman of color in that type of role. And I just said, you know what, I'm going to take a chance and I'm going to go over there. I'm going to take this pay cut and learn all that I can. And it was a 900 employee hospital, 4 people and a volunteer running HR. And back then we did everything. So I consider myself a true HR generalist at heart because there's not a job in HR I literally have not done. I'm the Swiss Army knife of HR. And so I consider myself that. And so I just rose up through the ranks. Every time I took a role, even if it was a role that I had to step back into, I knew that it was something I could learn from it. I could learn from that and still use it and leverage that to the next opportunity. And that's what I did throughout my entire career. So I probably spent the better part of my 25 plus year career in HR in public sector, and because I love the idea of working for something greater than myself. And also too, I've probably spent about 12 of those years in leadership roles. And it's the magnitude of just being drawn to HR. I tried to get out though, Bruce, I'll tell you that. And I thought I was going to go be a teacher. I was like, I've had it with these grown people. I'm going to be a teacher, because at least they turn over every year, right? But it just didn't work out that way. There were other plans. God had other plans for me. And so, I consider HR like the mob. As soon as you try to get out, they pull you back in, to quote Michael Corleone. So, they pull you back into it. And so this is where I need to be. This is my happy place.
I had Meredith Morris on the show, and she was telling me that her mom wanted her, or she was wanting to be a teacher. And she said, you need to go in business. You are a teacher. I love that. When you said, you kind of teed this up with, you were reluctant. I just don't associate reluctant with Billie Wright. It just doesn't fit. But I love that. The Swiss Army knife of HR. Oh my gosh, that is so good. You said earlier, you talked about there's a difference between mentor and coaching. I would love for you, like, what is the difference between mentor and coaching? Because I want to ask you a question around mentors. I always like to ask my guests, hey, who are some mentors in your career? But before we do that, I would love for you to share, like, what is that difference?
So I was that's a great question, because just last week I was on a webinar with Upnotch, and we were talking about what makes a great mentor. And when people go into coaching, it is different. So there are 3 levels of it, and people always seem to confuse the 3. There's counseling, which has you look back to address those things that have already impacted you. And then there's coaching, which has you looking forward. How are you going to put together a plan for those things that are in the future? Setting goals. And it's meant to be long-term, because when you're going through coaching, you're really looking to identify areas of growth for yourself. And so those are strategic things that you put in place for yourself when you're talking about coaching. And then with mentoring, it's really about leaning into where your mentee is leaning into the road you've already traveled. It's about giving that advice to others on things in which they have questions about, where they're not quite sure of, but you've already traveled that road. So you can give them guidance along the way to help with that. But here's the thing with all 3 of them, honestly, is that you have to do the work in whatever level you engage in. And also too, it's not the role of either one of those 3 people to just give you the solution. There's work involved in that. And every piece of that work requires change on your part, not the coach, not the mentor, and not the counselor. It requires you to change something about yourself, which is hard, Bruce. I'll tell you, even doing coaching and mentoring, I have had some very resistant mentees, and those that I have coached at the executive level. And I have just told them, I said, you know what, I can't coach you and I can't mentor you because you're coming with the solution, or you want me to give it to you. And that's just not how it works. So you have to be able to set those ground rules right off the bat to say, hey, this process, you own it. I'm just here to help you and provide you with some resources to give you a better way of thinking about things, and to help you put those things in practice that can make you a better leader, that can help grow your career, those kind of things. So that's the difference between coaching and mentoring.
That gives me chills. I got to tell you right now, if you're listening, you need to have your journal, you need to have your pen out, you need to be taking notes here. I love that. Counseling, coaching, and mentoring. We talked about that, but I wrote these words down though. And I love that, because you said a lot of it requires change, of course, but you said you got to do the work. And I was watching a show the other day. It was when the American Music Awards were in Frisco. And one of the ladies that won an award, I love what she said. She said, hey, if you're going to be a dreamer, you got to be a doer.
Yeah.
And I just it just stuck, because that was what you're saying is people don't realize, hey, we can share with you and counsel you and coach you and mentor you and all of these things. But at the end of the day, you got to do the work, right? Talk about some mentors in your career, like, as you've been going through, like maybe share some mentors and maybe some traits. What was it about them? What made them such a great mentor?
So Bruce, I just had this question posed to me the other day, and ironically enough, I've only had one mentor in my life. And I'll tell you why. It was that Black female that brought me over into this profession.
At the hospital.
When you're looking for mentors, especially women, and especially women of color, Black women in particular,
Okay.
Representation matters.
Mm.
It is very seldom that you will find people that will try to find a mentor, especially in my community, that looks like them. Oftentimes, too, mentors or mentees, they don't even know that they need a mentor or even what that looks like. I couldn't have told you that
Mm.
years ago, that I needed a mentor or what that looked like. I just would have never thought about that.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing too is that I think oftentimes when people, the higher up the leadership chain you go, the further away from the people you get. And so we
Mm.
lose sight of that. And I've always made it a mission and a point of mine that if I ever got into a position of power or influence, I was going to reach back. I'm extremely intentional about the people that I mentor and the people that I coach.
Mm.
And so, and when you're doing those kind of things and being intentional about it, you have to make sure that you understand that representation matters. And it's a matter of privilege too, not just white privilege. It's just privilege in general when you have power and influence.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when you have that and you don't recognize that you didn't get there by yourself, it's very hard to recognize that you might want to put yourself out there, be a coach or a mentor to someone else, and bring someone else along with that. So ironically enough, I've had a lot of advisors, still have them today. But in terms of true mentorship, I've only had one, and that was at the beginning of my career.
I love that. I love all that. And I love how you talked about how representation matters.
Mm-hmm.
It really does. And what's interesting as you shared that, I was sitting there thinking, when I was early in my career, I don't remember looking out for mentors. But
Mm-hmm.
as I'm now further in my career, I can look
Yeah.
back and see
Mm-hmm.
all of the people that made a difference in my life. I can remember things they said, things they did, things they
Mm-hmm.
showed me. But when you're going through it, your young career, you're trying to break through, it's hard to see it, isn't it?
It is very hard to see it. And like I said, I have had past bosses and colleagues, and to this day, they're extremely strong advisors to me.
Mm.
And do I look at them as mentors? Did I look at them that way then? No. I looked
Yeah.
at them as a sounding board. And I think
Yeah.
that's what most people do. But a true mentorship is someone that you can really lean into and tap into their past experiences and help guide you through where you're trying to go or where you want to go, or even if you need to even go in that direction.
Mm.
And the beauty about it for me is with a coach and a mentor said, coaches, it should be one and done. You shouldn't be someone's coach forever and a day, because at some point they need to get it.
Yeah.
And you have to then, as a leader, you always have these things where you want to lean back into something, just to bounce something off of people. But in true mentorship, I look at them as lifelong, because I learn from them, they learn from me.
Mm.
And even one of my first mentee in Austin SHRM, I consider us friends now. Even now I will call her and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this thing. What do you think? And so it's a different kind of relationship as a mentor
Yeah.
mentee versus a coach. It is a very
Yeah.
different relationship because of the level of influence and all of those different things. Very different.
Yeah, I've been part of mentorship programs, and I tell my mentee that you don't probably realize it, but I learn as much or more from them as they
Yeah.
learn from me.
Yeah.
I love that. Hey, I always like to talk about, purpose and, high performers such as yourself. You've had this success, but you didn't start out like you started out like early career. You're trying to find your lane, right? Once you got to a point where you're like, hey, I really love this performance coaching, all of the things I'm doing today. Was there a moment when you realized, hey, this is what I really love to do? Or were there moments along the way? Talk about purpose.
Mm-hmm. The moment came for me in 2014, well into my career.
Okay,
Right?
tell me more.
Because I held so many roles up until that point. I held roles from an operational standpoint. I held roles from a tactical and a managerial standpoint, all the way down to that HR assistant. But I never had a true role where I could see the influence to where one thing could move without me. I never had a role like that. There was always someone, if I was in the role, there was always someone like a backup to the backup kind of thing. But in this one particular role, so I'll tell you about it. So my husband and I, we were living here in Killeen, Texas. We had moved back in 2011. It was 2014. We were living our life like we always do. My husband was retired twice over now. And so I'm working in a transportation industry as their director of HR leadership role. And I get this call from a previous manager, and she said, "Hey, we want to know if you'd be willing to come back to Washington State to do a job around culture transformation and run their training department." At the time, it was employee engagement and training manager. Little did I know it was bigger than that, much bigger than that. And so when I came, and my husband and I made the decision to load up the wagon like the Clampetts, move back to Washington State. And I took on that role, partnered with the union to transform the culture from one of highly disengaged to engaged. And the union gave us money to do it, had never done that in 45 years of existence. And we just really, I had the support of the CEO of that company, of that organization, rebuilding that culture based on the foundation of respect. But what made it so for me to say, hey, now I found my purpose in this role, is that I was given the role of influence and impact, true influence and impact, to where, and I don't know, Bruce, if this was just my naivete or I just didn't know no better, to be honest with you, but I felt like I was the Pied Piper. And, you know, everywhere I went, I was speaking the message of why it was so important to have a culture where everyone felt, as my friend used to say, warm, wanted, and welcomed. And how could we move and shift this culture to where people really want to work here? The morale was low. They were highly disengaged. The IT system, the turnover was like 89%. I mean, it was crazy. I had to be crazy to take on a role like that, right? And to move 2,000 miles away to do it. But that role allowed me the ability to see the possibilities of what if. So I coach someone in Washington State now. She uses the phrase possibilitator. And I was like, what is that? Because I think I'm going to smuggle that word. And so when she explained to me, she says, Billie, is this thing within me where anything is possible. And to be a possibilitator is to spread that message to say anything is possible for you. You can make it happen. Just being a possibilitator. It's the what if factor. And so, and I went into that role with what if. So, you know, I had a training unit of 3. One was on the way out the door from retirement, and the other had only been in the role 4 months. And here I come in the role. And, you know, so we went from a team of like 30 something down to 3. And you're running a training unit, you're establishing employee engagement, you're doing OD work, you're doing change management, you're doing all of these things, and you're given the responsibility to do it independently. And so, and that was the turning point for me. That's when I knew there's something different about how I've been doing HR over all of these years. This is totally a different way to do it when you're leading from a place of true impact and influence. And that role allowed me that.
Okay. I love all of that. All of that. Possibilitator.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I wrote down what if. Like I'm sitting here thinking, wow, what conversations, how much different they'll be if we're walking around going, hey, what if? Like you're just like like you're engaging just in a different way. Like, hey, what if? Do you see what I'm seeing? What if we did that? Or maybe you know they're re-engaging with, hey, well, what if we do this? And all of a sudden, I could see where people feel like they belong into the conversation a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good. Oh my goodness. That is fantastic. I love that. You know, that's leadership, right? And whenever you're able to like help people like see that vision and create that influence to go there with you to what if. I do like to ask, and I think you mentioned earlier a little bit about when somebody says, hey, Billie, what is leadership to you? How would you respond to that?
And leadership for me is really about people. It is, you know, if you look at my LinkedIn profile, there's this thing, you know, start with the end in mind first. And the end for me is people. How are your decisions, your value system, how is all of that affecting people? Because at the end of the day, whatever decision you make in your organization is going to affect people. They got to do the work. They got to make sure that you hit those goals and those targets. But if you don't consider how those decisions are going to impact the people, you've missed the mark completely. Leadership also too is about relationship building. You have got to build strong relationships. And I'm an extremely relational person. You know this, Bruce. You've been with me a couple of times. So I'm an extremely relational person, and I value relationships. And those relationships have to be built on trust. If you don't have trust within your organization from a leadership perspective, people aren't going to follow you. They just aren't. And you have to always look at it when you're thinking about decisions that you're making, whether it's a strategic plan, whether it's establishing a vision or mission, value statement for your organization. Employees are going to always ask, if you want me to support that stuff you're putting on paper, it's the Whiffam effect. What's in it for me? They're going to ask that. If people can't see themselves in it, what you're asking them to do, they will not support it. You were quoting, before we started, you were quoting John Maxwell. So, I love Peter Drucker too. And, one of the things he says is that culture will eat strategy for breakfast every day of the week. Won't even ask for bacon, but they're going to eat it. But they will, because they can't support it. So when you're going into a leadership role, also to ask yourself, why do you want to be in a leadership role? Is it because of the position and title, or is it because you truly want to make a difference in how you lead and in the life of the organization, in the lives of the people you lead? Is it just for the paycheck? What is motivating you to go into that role as a leader? There has to be some type of intrinsic motivator that says, I want to do this thing as a leader. And what is that? And do people know your vision about your leadership, your philosophy around it? I consider myself a servant leader. Love Ken Blanchard. I consider myself that because I worked in public service for so long. You don't work in public service for the money. You do it for the mission. And so it's all of those things around leadership. Asking yourself, why do you want to go into it? And once you get to that place of leadership, then making those decisions and recognizing that you do what you do because of the people. And how are you supporting those people? How are you considering them in the way that you lead and the decisions that you're making? How are you engaging with them? It's a lot going into leadership. Bruce, it's not about going in there and signing some papers and shuffling stuff around. It's a role that I take great responsibility for.
Yeah, it has its ups and downs, but it has huge rewards. Huge rewards.
Truly does.
So much when you are really serving. I love that. Hey, you brought up LinkedIn. I did a couple things that stood out. Number one, I love chief people leader extraordinaire.
Yes.
I love how you said that. But I want to ask. You said throughout your HR and leadership career, you always began with the end in mind. How do you do that? Like, talk about that.
Again, for me, it's about the people. And I'll tell you this also too, Bruce. So I worked for a municipality here in the state of Texas. And one of the things that when I went into that role, oh my gosh, there was so much distrust between police and fire, and the city manager and the council. It was in HR. There was so much distrust in that. And again, might have been my naivete going into it thinking I could change the world. But for me, it is really about relationships and people. When you can get people to trust you, you can get them to do almost anything for you. They will put forth discretionary effort without you even asking them to do it, because they know that you come from a place of trust, care, and concern. And if they can't see that in their leader, they're just not going to do it. They're just going to come to work, do their 8 to 5, and then they're going home. It's just not going to be anything in between to left over to do. There's just not. So when I think about this beginning with the end in mind, it's just like I was stating earlier, thinking about the people. How is this thing that you call leadership in your role affecting the people that you lead? Because the higher up you go, the further away from the people you get, and there's a disconnect. And for me as a leader, I've always tried to make it a point to stay connected to the people. So my husband's retired Army. So we had this phrase, boots on the ground. I like to stay close to boots on the ground. That's where you're going to get your true information from. They can tell you exactly what's going on in the organization, what's broke, what's not right, what needs fixing, how people are feeling. You stay connected to the people and you can't ever go wrong. You just can't, because If you're making decisions for people, you're actually doing things to people and not with people. And it's always better to do things with people than to people. If you just think about it for yourself in your own career, how many times has someone you've worked for made a decision about how you do your work without even consulting you about how you do your work? So that's what I mean about starting with the end in mind first, doing things with people instead of to people.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Our boots on the ground. And by the way, tell your husband thank you for his service. That's fantastic. I love that. I do want to just kind of talk about this distrust for a second. Like that is, I talk. It seems to me, that we talk a lot about. And I gave you some questions beforehand. I didn't give you this question, but I was just thinking about it because I read something about it this morning, but it says, we talk a lot about things that divide us or create that distrust, but we don't talk about things that unite us, inspire us. How do you go into, like you talked earlier about, just changing this culture? A lot of times, yes, it's around that distrust. Like, how do you, I don't know, how do you coach? How do you coach leaders to create that trust in that environment? Because when we're talking about building trust, a lot of times it takes a long time, doesn't it? And it takes effort, doesn't it? And so I'm just curious, like, there's some people that are listening to the show right now. They're like, I'm in that environment. How can I build these relationships to where we can all be united? Any thoughts?
Yes, a lot.
You're like, how long do we got? I love it.
You just said something there. So, it takes a lifetime to build trust and a moment to ruin it. It takes that quick to ruin a trusting relationship.
And we all know examples of that, don't we? We all know. We can see them, right?
We can see them a mile away. But the thing about trust is that you have to be intentional about building those relationships. You have to be deliberate and consistent with the process of whatever it is you're trying to do. But the thing around trust is this for me, Bruce. When you are trying to build a trusting relationship, you got to get to know folks. And I tell people all the time, what do you know about your people outside the work that they do? Do you know them as people? That leader that I was telling you about that pulled me into personnel, I knew that she valued me for who I was as a person at that time. I also knew that she cared about me because she asked. We would have conversations that were not work related, but they were very personal related. Not that she was trying to dig all into my business, but she truly cared about me. My husband was in the military. Her husband was in the military. She had kids in school, had a son in school. So, there were some commonalities there. In one of my roles in Washington State government, I led an HR department of 65 HR professionals. Okay. I made it a point to meet with each and every one of them within my first 30 to 45 days, just for 30 minutes, just to see exactly who they were. Like we're having this conversation here to say, hey, I'm not even calling you. I want to know about what it is that you do, but I also too want to know a little bit about you if you're willing to share. And, just learning something about people. How wonderful is it for a leader to walk into an office and say, hey, how's your mom doing today? Did she get through a search? I mean, just those kind of things.
It's huge.
That it is huge. Do you know you can't even put a price on return investment for that? So when you're talking about building trust, ask yourself, how well do you know the people that you lead? If you don't know people for who they are as a person, then you're just looking at them as someone that says, okay, if they quit on Tuesday, I'm already Tuesday at 10, by 11 o'clock, I got the job posting up.
Yeah.
So how are you making people feel as though you value and care about them as a person? Because that sets the foundation for how you build trust with people.
It reminds me of I once read where Lou Holtz, the former football coach, talked about when someone comes up to you, they're wanting when you come up to them, they want to know three things. They want to know, hey, do I trust this person? Does this person care about me, and are they committed to helping me achieve my goals? Every time someone comes up to you, that's what they're talking about. So as you're sharing this story, that's the part that it takes time to go out into what John Maxwell, we talked about John Maxwell earlier, he talks about walking slowly through the crowd. We gotta walk slower and ask those questions and talk to people and find out more about them and really what makes them go, right? What inspires them, what motivates them, right?
True.
I love
You know,
that.
it's funny because we're quoting all these axioms about sports. I love John Wooden. I
Yeah.
don't think there's a
Oh my word.
I love John
Yes.
Wooden. And you know,
Yes.
and I used to always write weekly a quote on my whiteboard when I was in the office. And one of his quotes is my favorite, and it was I'm probably paraphrasing here, and it was saying it says, character is who you are, but reputation is who others perceive you to be.
Right.
So when you are a leader, how are you leading? How are you modeling that behavior? Because that's going to form the narrative of others on who they think I am as a leader. Because that's going to be the reputation that they think I am. So walking into that space, especially as a leader, how do you want to enter that space, and what kind of message do you want to send for you as a leader? What does that look like for you? So I would ask leaders to always question that about themselves. You know, how do you want people to view you? What's the story you want people to tell about yourself? My personal story is that I'm going to always, the way I enter into an organization, and that's the way I'm going to lead. And that's with my integrity and my character intact. You know, because as a leader, that's important to me, you know, that you model that behavior that you expect others to do. It's very important.
Yeah, I love that. As a matter of fact, when you talk about character and reputation, I think about how people today are talking about the importance of their personal brand, right? And your personal brand is basically your reputation. What do people think about you whenever you're not in the room? Hey, you're a pretty driven person. I'm just curious, like, what drives you?
You know, I'm motivated by a lot, but I would tell you I am. Truthfully, I am. But if I had to land on one thing that drives me, Bruce, it's really about every day I get a do-over. Every day that I'm allowed to wake up, I get a do-over. If I've done something that I wasn't supposed to do the other day, or I did it just right, I still get a chance to do something and lead and be a better person every day. And that motivates me because I don't ever want to get to a place in my life to where I said, whew, check that off the box. I'm done. It's a wrap. Because that's the day that it's all over for me. Because every day you have the opportunity to impact somebody's life in some small way. And you don't even know that you're setting out to do that. It just happens. So I'm motivated by the what if.
Love that.
Because it is just every day is a day to do it differently, to do something better, to engage with somebody different, to have an impact on somebody's life. And that motivates me. Whether or not it's professional or personal, if it's my family or anything, I have that opportunity each and every day. And I try really hard not to squander it.
What if? I love that. Hey, real quick, I want to just ask you, and I told you before we started, the time is just going to fly by. Hey, talk a little bit about the volunteer leadership. Like how has that helped you in your career, and what do you enjoy most about it?
You know, in some capacity, in some walk of life, I've always volunteered on some level and never even really considered volunteering.
I noticed that by looking at your LinkedIn. You are a giver.
I am, you know, I'm always volunteering, and I think that just comes from my upbringing. You know, I grew up in the church. My dad was a head deacon. My mother sang in the choir.
Wow.
We had the key to the church. So I grew up in that kind of environment to where I was always volunteering in something. I was a Sunday school teacher, vacation Bible school, something. I was always volunteering, and that's just been instilled in me. And I volunteer a lot now. I do a lot of pro bono work, and one of the things that has really helped me through my volunteerism is that I'm able to help others in some kind of way. I have to get to the place though to where I don't overextend. That's hard for somebody who's used to doing that and serving something greater or being of service to something or someone. But I do, and so just being in this volunteer leader role, I am constantly, people reach out to me all the time and say, hey, Billie, will you speak to this? Can you set up a meeting? I just got a phone call this morning with somebody. I met somebody at the reworked event two somebody, you know, just saying, hey, you're going to be at this event? you got 15 minutes. So, it's those kind of things you can see just from this role, the impact that you're having indirectly on people that turns into a direct relationship at some point. So just through this volunteer leader opportunity here with Austin SHRM, and any volunteer opportunity I do, it connects me to someone else who connects me to someone else who eventually it rolls back down to the organization I serve, to the benefit of the organization, quite frankly. So that's just that I think that has really been greatly beneficial to me in whatever aspect of my career, whatever path I'm on.
Yeah, it's amazing the connections where it leads you. Every time you say yes to serving others, then it continues to connect you with others. Hey,
Yeah.
I want to ask you this final question before we go to It's Time to Accelerate. I do want to ask you, have you ever been given any advice that was just so good you just find yourself sharing with others?
I once worked for a gentleman back home in Louisiana, and I will say his name here. I'm not sure if he's still alive now, but I will say it. His name was Art Lovett. He was a retired colonel from the Air Force, and this was back in the days where you could smoke in the office. So I'm dating myself. So he would smoke a cigar, and he would come in there, and he'd have the military black frame glasses on, and I would always work. So I was a single parent for a long time, and I would work long hours. And one day he came in the office and he sat me down and he says, "I need to have a conversation with you." And I thought, okay, what is this gonna look like? And he looked at me as a father would, and he leaned in and he says, "Little girl, back then, you work the job, don't let the job work you."
Oh,
profound moment, because it in what he was saying to me is that the work is going to be here. You don't have to work 20 hours a day just to get a job done, because when you come back in the next day, there's going to be more work. And so, you have to make sure that you find a balance with that, because I was a single parent also. So, I was relying on my parents and my son's dad's parents to pick him up from daycare because I was working. And he says, "You work the job, don't let the job work you." It's sort of like who's wagging the dog. Is the tail wagging the dog, or is the dog wagging the tail?
I love that.
And that was the best advice I ever got, because this is how it changed my leadership, Bruce. Every time I met with members on my team when they were new, I always told them, I said, "Hey, here's the deal. I am not going to email you after 5:30 in the afternoon at all." And I said, and I don't have the expectation that you do either. I said, if I do email you that way, you better not respond, because that was an oops. It wasn't on delayed send, because I don't want people to get in the habit of thinking if my boss is working, then I need to work. And so, and I have made that a point throughout my leadership journey, is to make sure that I'm having those conversations with my team and saying, even the executive team, and saying, "Hey, you all have my cell phone number. If it's urgent, if it's on fire, call me. If not, it can wait till tomorrow." And so that advice given to me back in the late 80s, I have carried with me to this day.
It's timeless. It's timeless. You work the job, don't let the job work you. Write that down, folks. That is profound. I love that. It reminds me, as a young leader, I remember I was trying to go in earlier so I could get caught up, and then I'd find myself behind again. It was just a cycle, like I was on this wheel. And my brother, he mentioned one time, he said, "Hey, it's going to be there tomorrow, man. Put in your time and go home." So that's good advice. I love that. I love that. Thank you for sharing. I know that's going to help somebody right now. Somebody right now is listening to the show, and they're in that cycle, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I've got to stop managing my day and start leading my life." That's what I got to do right now. And so I love that. Hey, I want to shift to It's Time to Accelerate as we kind of wind down the show. Hey, I know I can see you. For those that are listening, I'm looking at these bookshelves full of books. Would you rather read a book or listen to a podcast or an Audible?
I'm a book reader. Yeah. I'm a page turner. I am, and I love to. I still have a library card, Bruce. So I love to read. It's just one of the things. I was listening to a podcast the other day, the 10% Happiness by I can't think of Dan's last name. He used to be on the Good Morning America, but I listen to several different podcasts when I can. But
Yeah.
personally, I love to read.
Yeah.
It's just nothing beats a great book.
Love it. Love it. Hey, I always talk about great leaders or grateful leaders. What are you grateful for?
I am grateful for the opportunity to be able to give back in
Mm,
whatever that looks like. To whom much is given, much is expected. So
mm, I love
I
that.
love the fact that I'm able to do that. I'm grateful for that because I know the younger Billy didn't have that. And so now that I'm in a
Yep.
place to where I can, I'm grateful for the
Yeah.
opportunity to be able to do that. Mhm.
Yeah. I'll tell you that's probably a common thread for all high performers is that piece what you're talking about is whenever
Mhm.
they just feel like they're able to help people, serve people.
Mhm.
That's just what they're so grateful to be in that opportunity, to be in
Mhm.
that position to do that. Hey, let me ask you this. You're a very energizing person. Outside of like work, what energizes you? What do you like to do?
I like to travel. I
Hmm.
really do like to, and we don't do enough of that. And my husband's always on me. He's like, is something going on that I'm not aware about?" So I'm taking off the whole month of July, and we're gonna figure it out. I don't know what that likes to
Love
do,
it.
but that energizes me. I also too like to walk, but I don't know. I'm a nomad. I'm a
Yeah.
high performer, so I get bored easily.
Yeah.
So I like to travel and mix things up.
Hey, let me ask you, somebody's listening to the show right now, like when you talk to different people as a coach, I'm just curious, like, how can you tell they're a high
Mhm.
performer? Give me a
Mhm.
couple of traits.
I can see me and them.
I love that.
What I will tell you when I'm talking about that is that the first thing that comes out of their mouth is what others aren't doing. That's a clear indicator of a high performer because we can see the things that need to be done, but it's people that are holding us back by not allowing us to do those things. So when you have someone that comes in as a high performer, if you hear them express any kind of thing about, I could do this thing if only, it is usually followed by somebody's name.
Mm,
That's a clear indicator because that's a roadblock for us. High
mm,
performance, because I am one. I don't even apologize for it anymore. But I will tell you this though, Bruce, I have been knocked out of the running for several jobs because I'm a high performer.
mm.
Because most leaders don't know what to do with high performers. We're a lot to manage. My nephew says it best. Sometimes, Auntie, they just can't handle all of you. They just
Yeah.
can't. And so, and when you're a high performer, most
Mm,
leaders they find that to be challenging. So how am I
yeah.
going to challenge this person? And high performers need to be challenged.
Yeah.
They need to have something that engages them on a totally different level. And I'm
Yeah.
speaking about this personally. If I'm not challenged, I get bored.
Yeah.
I can see things ahead strategically. I'm looking ahead. When
Mm,
other people's are like, okay, let's just slow it down a
mm.
bit. Let's just walk it out. Just kind of walk at a 2-3 step pace. I'm like, no, I got my sneakers on. I'm up the road. I need to be out of there. So yeah, that's how I can spot the high
Yeah.
performance.
That's so
Yeah.
good. I appreciate you sharing that because there's people listening right now that are like, I'm looking to hire a high performer, or how do I know I got high performers on our team? And I'm with you right on that. Hey, a final question. And then one of my favorite questions, Billy, 10 years older, is knocking at your door and you're going to go answer that door. What's she going to tell you?
She's probably gonna tell me that it is not that serious.
Hmm.
hmm It is not that serious. Yeah. And be kinder to yourself. I always tell people to be kind to themselves.
Hmm.
And I don't think I do a very good job of that for myself. And I'll tell you this, Bruce, because I know we're at the end of time, why I say that. I don't think that I oftentimes am kind to myself when I overextend myself. I have a problem with saying no. And so I've been working on that. Challenge when people reach out to you and they need your help or they need you to be of service to them in some kind of way because they're also too looking for someone to fill in a void that they don't have. And a lot of times it's volunteering. I have to really be mindful to say no. And so my older self would tell myself that be kind to yourself and it's not all that serious. It will be okay. And so that's what I would tell my younger self.
I love that. That's a wise 10 years older Billie Wright. I appreciate you sharing that. My mom likes the saying, it's no biggie.
Mhm.
Okay. It's not that bad. It's not that serious, but I love how you talked about being kind. And I think that that's the key is we got to, give ourselves grace,
Mhm.
do
Mhm.
what you can do your best
Mhm.
and forget the rest. So, hey,
Mhm.
I've enjoyed our time together so
Yeah.
much. If someone heard something that you said today on the show and I don't know, they want to connect with you or follow you, how's the best way for them to connect?
Two ways. You can always find me on LinkedIn, and you can always find me through Austin Sherm website,
Hmm.
austinsherm.org.
I will put both of those links in the show notes so you can
Yeah.
reach out. And if you do reach out to Billy, say, hey, I heard you on Live in the Leadership Lane and share something, maybe a takeaway. That always helps like that connection be that much deeper. I appreciate you so much. I appreciate what you do for Austin Sherm and Texas Sherm and just all the good that you're doing. And I cannot wait to share this episode.
Well, Bruce, I appreciate you even asking me. I consider this, I am truly humbled by the opportunity. So I consider this an honor, and also too for investing in leaders. We don't invest in ourselves enough. And so these podcasts to me is an investment. And I hope all of those that are listening are taking note of that these are lessons that can help grow and develop them as well.
I will tell you, just over the last 150 plus episodes, I've grown so much as a leader, learning so much from people like you, Billy. So thank you again. I appreciate it. I'll talk to
Yeah,
you later.
thank you.